Davis, shake, crossover, step back, and deposit.
Are you serious? Wow, can't believe it.
Gives it to Jenkins for the championship. Yeah, send it in, Jerome.
Hello and welcome back into Finding Nylon, episode 5, our first episode after Christmas. If you guys didn't get to listen to the last episode, we had Owen Timmerding on episode 4. Got to talk UK Wildcats. It was a lot of fun to sit down with him. But guys, we had Christmas since we last met. I'm going to take a second to kind of encapsulate the season, go around the room, ask everyone what was their favorite part of Christmas, whether it was like a gift that you got, a meal you had, what was something like a highlight of the Christmas. Matt, we'll start with you since you're looking to have a fun time right now.
Honestly, I mean, this isn't college basketball, but Bengals had a perfect weekend in terms of, I mean, they played awesome that first half, somehow won, and I think it's kind of like the game where it's the team learned a lesson, like they can't play at their food. Not that they're playing like shit in the second half, but they got a win and learned a lesson kind of from that win. I think that it was like kind of people would have walked away with that game if they lost, saying that was a good loss, like they were underdog from that loss, but they're walking away with the game with a win and a lesson learned. So yeah. And they got next 2 games, they can easily get the 1 seed. So looking pretty optimistic for the Bengals.
That is true. Cole, what was your highlight of the holiday season?
Matt took mine, but I'll do a gift. Favorite gift, new pair of golf shoes.
Ooh, there you go. Carson, what about you?
Mine's also, I got new golf clubs and I got a new golf bag, so that was much needed for me. So upgrades there, and then we also went as a family, went to Jeff Ruby's last night, the new one downtown. Just an incredible dining experience. So last few days have been great, and then just spending time with family as always. That's always one of my favorite parts of the holidays. So yeah
No, I'd have to kind of say ditto to that. Spending time with family is always great. It's cool to got to see some of my cousins that I haven't seen in a few months, so that was fun. I'd say favorite gift I got a new Unreal hoodie, like it a lot. So definitely a fun time of year. Obviously basketball kind of takes a hiatus during the season, but we're getting right back into the swing of things. We have some things we do have to get caught up on. First and foremost, new top 25, some things shifting around. We'll start with the newcomers. Xavier checks in, West Virginia and New Mexico all come into the rankings. Xavier checks in with New Mexico at a tied 22nd spot. What are your guys' kind of takeaways with that? Obviously, I feel like West Virginia is also another team that could have easily been in there, but they finally get to that 10-win mark along with Xavier, and that kind of catapults them into the top 25. What do you guys got on that?
Well, West Virginia, I want to talk about West Virginia's net rankings a little bit. They're 11th in the net ranking right now, which is pretty wild considering they don't have any crazy wins. So I guess it just goes to show you like how inconsistent the net ranking can be, but as a Xavier fan, not complaining too much, but yeah, it was time for Xavier to be in the top 25, not necessarily because they proved themselves in any way. It was just they kept on racking up wins. They didn't lose against anyone who was bad. So, and yeah, it's cool to see them in the top 25. I think they deserve it.
Yeah, no, we'll get to Xavier in a little bit for sure. Break down their most recent game and their future game coming out of this break, but the next person we're going to talk about, North Carolina, gets back in the top 25. Carson, what do you make of that? Obviously, I feel like they've picked up enough wins after that rocky start. And I think this is another situation where they're going to get in, even with those couple losses, because of their initial ranking as the top team. But I do think North Carolina deserves to be back in there. They've got Armando Bacot, and I feel like the players around him are starting to play a lot better together, and they're finally meshing as a team. What do you make of the Tar Heels checking in this week?
I think UNC is still a very, very talented team, like a rocky start, maybe a national title hangover, as I like to call it. But they had a recent win over Michigan. I think they'll get back on their feet. Like, I just think it's not like they had an easy out of conference schedule. So they definitely tested themselves. And I think they'll be better for it as the season goes on. And I don't think the ACC is anything special. I mean, you got Duke, Virginia Tech, who just lost to Boston College. So we'll see how good they are. But I don't think the ACC is much of a gauntlet this year. So I think, other than Duke and maybe a couple other teams, I don't think they'll get tested a ton. But I think they belong in the top 25. I mean, I think Michigan's a very solid team, and I think they'll finish in the top 2 or 3 in the ACC. And yeah, I have no problem with them being back in there.
Yeah, seems like the ACC is taking more of a Big East form this year where anyone can beat anyone, and there's not as much distance between the top 5 teams and the rest of the league like we've seen in past years. Now we've looked at the newcomers kind of at the bottom of the standings. The rest of the middle has, for the most part, stayed the same. Teams moving up 1 spot, teams dropping a few. One of the big drops was Virginia moving down to 7. They've had a couple games that I feel like they really would like to get back. They lost that game to Miami, Florida, so they're moving to 8-2, but it certainly feels like another team that can make up some ground in the ACC. But now we're going to turn our focus to the top of the standings. 1, 2, 3, Purdue, UConn, Houston. It feels like the AP got these right, and it just feels like all those 3 teams are head and shoulders above the other teams to this point in the season. What do you guys think about top 3 from the AP this year?
Yeah, I think the AP poll is what it should be right now. I mean, I don't think you can debate Purdue or UConn being the top 2. Both are undefeated. UConn got tested by Georgetown the other night. They ended up pulling away late, but they hung around with Georgetown for overwhelming majority of the game. They even trailed at some point. So I think I'm really excited to see how they play against Xavier, because I think that'll be their first huge test on the road, and I know that'll be a huge game for Xavier, obviously. And I think obviously Purdue's at the top. I think they're easily the best team in the Big Ten. They've beat multiple ranked teams so far, and I think I'm curious to see what happens if maybe UConn beats Xavier, if they jump them this weekend. But I think that'll be a great game to kind of see how good UConn really is this early.
Yeah, that feels like an opportunity for UConn to do just that, because that's the one I feel like leg up in the early AP weeks is that because the Big East play starts so early before Christmas, that would be their 3rd or 4th Big East win coming into that game. So it just feels like if they do pick up that win at the Cintas Center, which Xavier's trending towards being a really good team in the Big East and in the country this year, it just feels like that could be the signature win to this point in the season that jumps them to the number 1 spot. But Houston, I mean, they're 12-1 too. We're talking about 2 undefeated at Purdue and UConn, but Houston just feels like a solid team as well.
Yeah, I wanted to say one more thing about UConn. They have a pretty decently hard game tomorrow against Villanova at home. Villanova is starting to look like they're back. They got all their guys back. So, I mean, I'm kind of confident in Villanova getting UConn a tough game tomorrow. I think their streak of double-digit wins is gonna end.
Yeah.
Wait, Rang, I have a question. You said that Xavier's the type of game that if UConn wins would get them in the number 1 spot.
I just think because it's a conference win, on the road, that could make them jump Purdue.
I agree with them because Purdue has a easy schedule coming up.
Oh, I'm not disagreeing with you. I'm just saying.
Yeah, I think the AP will start to, now that we're getting into conference play for everyone, I think they're going to start valuing tough road conference games a little bit more. Obviously, to this point, Carson's been right on the money. It's if you win, you keep moving up. If you lose, you drop. But I think now is the point in the year where you start to see if you pull out a win on the road in your conference, that's going to be taken in with some extra weight versus some of the other wins. And it's not to say anything slighting towards Purdue. Obviously, Purdue has played a pretty much perfect season to this point. They've gone out, they've tested themselves in some games. I just more think because they've got the early advantage of having more Big East games under their belt, that could be the deciding factor between 1 versus 2 for UConn. But
Yeah, for sure. I saw a debate between I think it was Jeff Goodman talking, like they were trying to debate who should be number one between Purdue and UConn. I don't even think it's like close right now. I think Purdue is
yeah,
easily number one right now. But
yeah,
Jeff Goodman was trying to make a case for UConn having like a better overall body of work. I just don't think that's anywhere near the case right now. I mean, Purdue beat several ranked teams by double digits.
yeah,
I think Purdue's easily the number one team in the country right now, but I'm excited to see how UConn fares in a Big East that's pretty good top to bottom. I mean, I haven't
yeah,
seen any teams that's like sticking out that's just overall really bad. The Providence Marquette game the other night was incredible. Every game at Providence just seems like it's
yeah.
just incredible, just multiple overtimes. Like they're good for one or two of those every year, it feels like. And but so yeah, I think the Big East is a really good conference, definitely a top probably 4 or 5 conference. It's tough to say top 3. Like there's there's 3 or
Yeah.
4 really good conferences right now. So
Yeah,
Yeah, this
I think they're 4
year
or
is
5.
one of the years that I would like say that I don't think Big East, and obviously I'm a Big East lover. I've always kind of repped that conference, but I just don't feel like this year is the year that you make the top 3 distinction. But I say 4 pretty confidently. But yeah, and we're gonna dive into that. That's kind of gonna be the talk of the episode is our deep dive into the Big East Conference. But so far, it has proven that even with a really good team like UConn in the conference and Xavier a little bit behind them, it just feels like every game could be won by anyone. There's no team that's just dominating the slate. But after we've talked about the top 3, and I think the AP got it right, you've got Kansas, Arizona, Texas, Tennessee, Alabama, Arkansas, Gonzaga, top 10 to round it out. I think you got a lot of powerhouses in there. The one thing I do want to talk about is Texas. It almost seems, now granted their schedule has not been as hard, but it almost seems like the whole Chris Beard debacle has made them better somehow. And you have to wonder with young guys that are all in a locker room together, how some of those distractions can take effect on their play. But it seems like Texas has been able to rally the troops together, and they're playing some of their best basketball right now.
That's a I forget what the name of that it's called. It's like where like a sports team will like after a head coach is fired or whatever, like the very next game, like the stretch of games, they'll just play out of their mind. The reason I saw it was with the Broncos firing Nathaniel Hackett.
Yeah.
like the
That's
Jeff
like
Saturday experiment
yeah,
came out
people were
immediately.
high or like way higher on the Broncos beating the Chiefs this week because he got fired and like the players are just gonna like play out of their mind because like it's a commonly known thing after head coach is fired mid-season. So that'll be
Yeah.
interesting to see.
Yeah, it is kind of an interesting phenomena in sports that has happened, but it seems like it's paying off for Texas right now. Then moving out of the top 10, we go to UCLA, who I think has solidified themselves in that spot at 11-2. They've played a really tough non-conference. They're turning their attention to Pac-12 play. Then Baylor at 9-2. I'm still a little skeptical on Baylor, but I think Coach Drew has got his guys kind of on the straight and narrow again. Virginia has dropped down to 7, like we mentioned. Miami, Florida jumps up to 14. I think they're a very solid team. Coach Larinaga always has a good team there. Then Wisconsin at 15. Indiana drops to 16. Duke at 17. I think those teams are all kind of in the right spot. Duke had that tough loss at Wake Forest. They're going to need to get back on the straight and narrow after that. TCU 10-1. They move up 2 spots. UK at 8-3 drops down to 19. Auburn at 20. And the big one that we need to talk about, Mississippi State confirmed fraud, loses a game to Drake. These guys stink. I was right. I'm 2-0 on my takes. Creighton stinks. So
That game proved nothing. That game against
Rank.
Drake proved nothing.
Rank. Okay, yeah, like Drake, yeah, like looking just like at the name, yeah, everyone's gonna think they're stuck. Like, I don't know if you watched the Drake game this year. I don't know why I caught myself watching Drake this year. It was over break. They're like a solid mid-major basketball team.
Yeah, I mean they're good
I'll
for
give
the
you-
Missouri Valley, but like
They play no. Mississippi State plays Alabama tomorrow. I'm giving you one more game. Depending now, if they lose by 30 to Alabama, I'll give you your take. Yeah, you got it right. But if they like hang around Alabama and it's a close game, you're wrong.
I don't think you can say a team is a confirmed fraud till like the season's over, or if like
Yeah.
they missed the tournament. Like
Yeah,
what's
they
a
lost
fraud
one
then?
game.
They're 11 and what are they? 11-1?
1-1. Yeah,
And they lost to a Missouri Valley team on the road. Like that's like Drake's Super Bowl. Like you got
Yeah.
a ranked team coming into their place. Like that's a
can't-
huge, that's a massive game for them. So I don't think that game tells us anything about Mississippi State.
Like
Like
Rang,
Bill
that's
said.
like saying like this year when the Bengals lost to the Steelers week 1, that's like saying like, oh, them going to the Super Bowl last year was fraudulent. Like they lost 1 game.
It's
Like,
I'm
basketball
gonna
is a
give them
completely different thing.
significantly more time before I say
that you
fraud.
can't like just automatically just
Well, this is my thing. All right.
here we go.
They lost to Richmond, Drake did, by 30 points on December 10th. Then they beat Mississippi State. Drake also lost to St. Louis, who St. Louis is an all right team. I'll give them that.
St.
But
Louis is
it's not
favored
like
in
St.
the
Louis
A10.
is lighting the world on fire.
St. Louis
Drake
is
has
favored
not
in the
tested
A10.
themselves
But
either.
so you said they lost by 30 to Richmond, right?
Yeah.
So is Arizona State lost by 30 to San Francisco? Baylor lost by 20 something, maybe 30 something to Marquette.
Well,
Are
I
both
said
of
that
those
I'm
teams
not
terrible?
sold on Baylor.
All right. I mean, I'm just saying, like, my point is more so like big losses happen. Like, I think it just happens early in the year sometimes. I think
Yeah.
you're gonna have bad games. So I don't know. We have different opinions, but I'm gonna give Mississippi State significantly more time. I like the way they play. I think I might be higher on them than others. I think the way they play with how good their defense is, they'll hang around with anybody. So I don't know. I think they're a good team. Obviously, you don't want to like lose to Drake, but I don't think it's like that bad of a loss. But I'm gonna give them more time, like see how they are in SEC play before I give like a
Why?
overall assessment on
How
them.
did that game get on their schedule? It was like a really weird game.
Yeah,
How do
I
you
don't.
find yourself playing at Drake before
Yeah.
conference play?
Well, I mean, Drake's been solid in past years, but like,
Well,
yeah,
I mean, they're
I
one of the
agree.
good.
I just don't know why you risk that against Drake.
That's what I'm saying.
I don't either.
I don't know. It's a weird schedule game.
Yeah, but all right. I mean, like you guys are right. We can't. Only time will tell. I don't believe that Mississippi State is what they've been hyped up to be to this point in the season. But good talk on the top 25. I think looking at some of the other teams that received votes, Charleston is a team that's trending in the right direction. Maryland got 87 votes. I really don't love Maryland. Memphis got 74 votes. I think Memphis can be a team that shocks some teams going forward. I would not be surprised if they fare very well in the AAC, but you got other teams like Ohio State, Virginia Tech, Missouri, San Diego State, Marquette, Texas Tech, Providence receives 6. So a lot of teams that we could see enter the top 25 if teams in front of them lose. But good talk on the top 25. I think this week is one that was done pretty well. I think all the ranking, there's not really any question rankings like what's going on here. I think they were pretty solid on the mark. Now let's turn our focus. Another State of the Union. Cole, like we always do, we're going to start off with Dayton. What have you liked from the Flyers recently? What needs to happen? You guys are turning towards Atlantic 10 play. What kind of chips need to fall into place for the Flyers?
They're starting to play a lot better. I mean, it's kind of hard for them to play perfect without, their 2 starting guards that are not going to be back anytime soon. But yeah, I mean, Mongolian Mike's doing better in the point guard role. Still not great. I mean, they had a couple of good wins over, or like decent wins over break, which is always good to see. They got a big one tomorrow night against Duquesne, just to open up A10 play at home, which would be good. Duquesne's 10-3. I mean, they haven't played. I wouldn't say anyone great. I mean, they lost to Kentucky by double digits, but I think beating Duquesne tomorrow night would be a big jump for them. Kind of getting into A10 play, and so that they don't fall into a stretch of just losing the first A10 game, because then they got Davidson on Saturday. So if they can somehow come away 2-0 after this week, I think it'll prove this team can play without their best players. So hopefully when they do get their best players back later in January or February, they can hit the ground running.
Yeah, I agree. I think Duquesne is obviously, when you look at the A10, I feel like that's always kind of a litmus test game to see where your team stands. And it certainly helps to have that game. I think Duquesne does turn into a must win, because going to Davidson for that game on Saturday is going to be really tough. And I feel like you want to have, at least knowing like even if that game doesn't go how you want it to, you can come out at 1-1 in the A10. I think that's a definitely a must-win game for the Flyers.
And I'm still very confident they can win the A10. I mean, the A10 is wide open this year, which is like the past couple years hasn't been that way. You know, Dayton's been dominant in the A10 the past couple of seasons. Like give or take, one or two seasons they haven't been, but there's really no team this year because that's like, jumping out at you. Matt, I know this is gonna make you a little unhappy. Fordham's not good.
No, they suck.
And so, like, they're technically favored to win the A10 right now, but the real favorite's St. Louis, and I mean, St. Louis is always good, but no real like favorite, which I like. And so, even Dayton, a little banged up, I think has a very good shot at still winning the A10. Losing 2 or 3 games.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. And St. Louis always feels like one of those teams that's built for March. And they prove to do that every year. Great breakdown on Dayton. I think tomorrow's game is going to be a must watch for the Flyers to kind of see where they stand. Carson, we're going to turn it over to you now. Cole, obviously, chip in where you see it fit, but UC, they've gone on somewhat of a hot streak here since the shootout, won 3 in a row. They put up the 100-point performance against Miami, Ohio. They pick up the win against LaSalle, and then another one against Detroit Mercy. They're turning their attention to Tulane on Thursday, and then Temple at Temple on New Year's Day. What have you liked about the Bearcats? Where do you want to see improvement going in the AAC play?
So they capped off at a conference play against Detroit Mercy. And obviously when you look at the name, it's like you don't think anything of it. They're 5-8 now, like not a very good team, but what a lot of people, well, I don't know, but they have one of the best scorers literally in like the history of college basketball on their team, and Antoine Davis. I think he's like top 15 all time in most points scored. So going into that game, I was kind of nervous to see how I mean, that guy, I think he's averaging over 24 points a game. I think he's the leading scorer in the country right now. So like, obviously when you have a guy like that, if he gets hot, like a game could get close. It was close for most of the game, but I love the way David DeJulius played against him. I think he matched up very well. He wasn't afraid to trash talk a little bit, which I loved. I mean, I think that's just how competitive he is. And I think, to win that game by 18, like I said, Detroit Mercy is not a great team, but you need to contain a score like that. And I love the way they did that. I think their offense continues to look pretty solid. UC didn't shoot very well against Detroit Mercy, but they still found ways to get the ball inside to Victor Locken, who had another double-double, 18 points and 15 rebounds. I mean, he's like, to go from where he was last season to where he is this season is ridiculous, because I think a lot of UC fans would agree. A season ago, we were very nervous anytime he stepped on the floor. He looked uncomfortable pretty much at all times, and he's quickly emerging as UC's probably most important player. I'm not saying he's their best player skill-wise. He's probably not. But like in terms of importance, if he can stay out of foul trouble and stay on the floor, he's lethal, and teams don't know who to focus on right now between DeJulius and Victor Locken, and Landers Nolly. When he's hot, he's also dangerous. But in terms of what I haven't liked, I'd say like there's still stretches where the offense is just like it doesn't look fluent. There was a few possessions the other night where like Davenport would dribble like into the middle of the floor, get trapped, like have to throw it out, and then the shot clock would wind down. They had a terrible shot. There's still some defensive collapses and stuff like that. I hate when UC gets out rebounded against a team like that. I hate when UC gets out rebounded in general. I feel like rebounding is an effort thing and kind of like an IQ thing. So I always want them to out rebound everybody they play. I know it's like a very difficult task to overcome, but I think rebounding, and specifically offensive rebounding, is just monumental to win, especially close games. But I've loved the way, like I said, the offenses look good. I think the defense is getting better. I loved what I've seen out of the freshmen. I think Daniel Skillings will be a very special player, but overall, I like where they are, 9-4, and then you take on Tulane to open conference play, then Temple on the road, which they've always struggled there. But also an all-time bad beat is the next week. They play Houston at home at 3 the same day. The Bengals will play the Ravens to potentially clinch the North. So I'm really hoping the Bengals game gets flexed to like Sunday night or something, so it has like no impact, because that's obviously a massive game for UC, and we need that place packed. So I'm hoping that sorts itself out.
Yeah, and I was going on with Carson with like Detroit Mercy. Their coach was the coach at Indiana for a while. I forget, of course, now I forget his name, but like very successful head coach.
Mhm.
Also had like a program like Indiana a while ago, and so like they get overlooked, like Carson said. But like you said, Antoine Davis, who's on pace to be the highest scorer in college basketball history. It's like I don't care who you play for, like that's ridiculous. But yeah, Locken's looking really good. They shot 17% from three the other night. Like
Yeah.
things I don't like to see. They're blowing teams out, but like that's gonna be their make or break. Like the difference in them beating Memphis, like teams like Memphis, or like keeping it close with Houston, is going to be, they play well in so many other aspects of the floor, but they're going to need to knock down threes.
Mhm.
Needed, instead of having possessions where Jeremiah is a drive up the court, pulls up or whatever. But the one thing I'm starting to like from Jeremiah, though, like 2 for 12 from three, that's ridiculous. But he's starting to play like his high school self. Seeing him play all throughout high school was something. It was like, oh my, like he was the best player on his high school team alongside Miles McBride and Jackson Hayes, who are obviously in the NBA now. But like you wouldn't, like there was no argument that he was definitely the best player on that team. And so him, like starting to score more inside, taking guys 1-on-1, backing people down, and shooting those shots that he creates for himself rather than just heaving up threes is definitely encouraging to see versus heaving up 30 footers. But yeah, I'm excited if they can start off 3-0 in the AAC and then head and then welcome Houston into town. I think that'll be big for them. Beating Wichita State's always good, and then hosting Houston hopefully 3-0 in the AAC will give them some confidence to hopefully keep that game close and maybe fingers crossed pull out a win there. But yeah.
Yeah, that's going to be a tough game, and that one feels like something's got to give, whether it's the Bengals moving the tip off or Bengals moving their opening kick or UC moving their tip off. Just feels like there's too many fans of
You would
both
think they would
franchises.
somehow coordinate that, but apparently not.
That could be bad.
Xavier did that for the Chiefs game. They changed the Xavier West Virginia game so that it wouldn't be the same day as the Chiefs game.
I have to think you see, like, I don't know. I feel like you have to have a pulse on the situation. Like if the Bengals and the Ravens go into next week with the AFC North on the line, like you're gonna have to budge ultimately.
Yeah, because they're hurting themselves.
Yeah,
like, I think nobody there if
it's out of and if the Bengals game stays at 1, the UC Houston game's at 3. So that's like right when the third quarter would start around there. Like, so
yeah, I don't know
the
how they're
important
gonna
time of the game.
Yeah,
I don't know how they're gonna do that, especially because like if the UC or if the Bengals game stays at 1, like they're gonna have to start like because they can't move to noon because that does nothing.
Right.
And so if they move it, it's like
I don't think they can move the game
5 or 6 o'clock on a Sunday is just weird.
Yeah.
Like
I don't know what you do. I mean, a night Sunday game is also not ideal. People have work.
It goes back to the fact like why does the AAC play Sunday games? It kills viewership. It kills.
He always plays their big AAC games on Sundays. They play Houston every year on Sunday.
Yeah. So, all right. Yeah. Great breakdown on UC turning towards AAC play. Matt, got a little bit of time before we deep dive into the conference. What have you liked about Xavier? They pull out that win against Seton Hall, who obviously we are very familiar is a very tough opponent, had not beaten them in years. Interesting nugget about the game, Colby Jones playing with the flu in that game. I was sitting with one of my buddies at that game, and it was kind of funny. He remarked how he thought Jack Nungy looked sick during the game. So retrospectively, that was very much a possibility, but it's good to escape with a win. What did you like about that kind of open to Big East play for the Muskies thus far?
Yeah, I think it was kind of a symbol of Sean Miller's our coach now. It's not Travis Steele anymore because Travis Steele never beat Seton Hall at home. So that was kind of cool to see. I think Fremantle is back to his, people like to say his freshman year is his best year. I think he's back to whatever year I think he was his best year. Like he's playing his best basketball right now. He's phenomenal at offense. Still needs to work at defense, but he's awesome at offense. It's helping out a lot because Nungy's been struggling a little bit recently. He struggled last game. So
Yeah,
there's
and,
that
and the,
too.
the thing with Nunji too is they kept having to sub him out. Like I said, obviously it's just a hunch. I have to imagine he was feeling some of the effects of whatever sickness was going around that
He
team because
looked that was
he
the
looked
worst
gassed and
game
out of it
I've
most of the
ever
time.
seen him play. Yeah, I mean
Yeah,
he didn't make a
so
shot. He went
yeah,
0 for 5
yeah.
in the
And
field.
then you're
As a-
right. You get Fremantle into double digits. I've talked about it before. Not a Jerome Hunter guy, but the Jerome Hunter game played a phenomenal role in that game. Came in, left it all out on the floor, picked up the slack for Nunji, was rebounding like a bat out of hell, just all over the floor. It seemed
Yeah,
like
I was
that,
gonna
that
get
that
to
was
that.
a much needed boost for Sean Miller.
Yeah, I was gonna get to that. Jerome Hunter played a key role in that game. He really like picked up for Nunji because if Nunji played like that, no one picked up for Nunji would have lost that game easily. So
Yeah,
Jerome played a huge role in that. But I do want to talk about Xavier's next 3 games. I mean, I'm a very pessimistic Xavier fan, probably because my last 4 years been terrible, but I could easily see Xavier losing the next 3 games. Rangers, are you familiar with the
yeah.
next 3 games?
Yeah, I mean, this is my thing. St. John's is a good team. Granted, I will say St. John's has played no one this year, but they are a 10-win team at this point, and St. John's always feels like a trap game. But the one thing I will say is I do like how this season started. So you get Georgetown on the road, dip your feet in the water, Seton Hall at home, make sure the water's warm, go to St. John's, pick up a big win if you can get it. You're fully submerged, and then you get to UConn, the big one. You are swimming in the deep end by full pace at that
Yeah,
point. So
no, I like the idea.
I think these are games that are not automatic losses, but you're absolutely right. If the best Xavier team possible does not show up, they're very losable.
Yeah, I like that take a lot. Actually, I think the Big East schedule kind of works out for them a bit, but I mean it's brutal these next 3 games because I mean especially the last 2 games for Xavier, they could have lost the Georgetown. I mean I know they lost Georgia, they ran away with it at the end, but they could have lost
Yeah.
that game. They
Yep.
easily could have lost Seton Hall game at home.
Yeah.
So like for me, I kind of think they're due for a loss, and I do think they're going to lose at St. John's. Then UConn, I think that's anyone's game to win because we're so good at home. But
Yeah.
I just don't see Xavier winning at Villanova. I don't think
I don't
we've
know.
never done it before, and I don't think we ever will. That's just how my mind thinks. So
Yeah.
I don't know. I'm thinking we're going to lose at least 2 of the next 3.
This is my thing is that I think the Villanova game is going to be decided a lot by coaching. Sean Miller, at this point in his career, I'm not saying that it's going to stay this way forever, is a much, much more experienced and much better coach than Kyle Neptune. I don't think Neptune has his guys yet. He doesn't have his team where he wants them to be. So I think that game is winnable. I like the fact that we go to Villanova first, so we can pick up a win at home later on in the season against them. But it does certainly feel like those are easily losable games for Xavier if they don't throw their best punch. But kind of great state of the union. We're going to now turn our focus to the Big East breakdown. We're going to take a deep dive into the conference, and we'll see you there. And welcome back into Finding Nylon. Now time for kind of the topic of the episode, our deep dive into the Big East. Kind of a fun way to do this because the Big East has actually been going on for about a week and a half, 2 weeks now, the Big East play. It's kind of cool to see where it started, where we thought it was going to go to now. I think the big thing you have to talk about, we talked about it a little bit earlier in the show. UConn seems like the favorite to win this conference. Obviously, it's one of those things they have to stay away from the injury bug and kind of keep their role going. But it just seems like that team is the team to beat in the Big East, and they are certainly going to be the ones with the targets on their back going through this year.
Yeah, for sure. I think UConn right now is easily the best team in that conference, but you got a few teams behind them. I think you look at Xavier, obviously, like we've talked about a good amount. You have Providence, Villanova, Creighton. Like, I think there's numerous teams that'll be able to make a run for it. I think UConn's easily the most talented team, but even Marquette, like I think St. John's, there's a lot of teams. I think whoever finishes in the top 3 is kind of a toss up right now. Like I think there's just a lot of talented teams that are right there. UConn's 2-0 to start conference, Xavier's 2-0, Providence is 2-0, Villanova's 1-0. So I think there's a good amount of teams that'll be able to compete for that top spot, but I just think UConn right now is definitely the favorite. I don't think that's like super debatable right now. We'll see how they fare against Xavier on the road. That could be a huge game to decide who wins the conference. But I always look at Villanova, like they had turnover, new coach, but it's still Villanova in my eyes. So like I don't know. It's hard for me to think about them not finishing in the top 2 or 3 in this conference. We'll obviously see. Like I think they're starting to get healthy, but it's hard for me to think like Villanova won't be there at the end in the top 3 or 4 teams.
Yeah, I'm the same way. Someone that like grew up watching Xavier lose at Villanova and lose at home against Villanova every year. It's hard to think Villanova is not going to finish in the top 4. But I actually do disagree with you with the most talented team. I think the most talented team is easily Creighton. I think Creighton has the best roster from top to bottom. And I still I'm trying to figure out how they lost 6 games in a row. I think they're starting to come back now that Kalkbrenner's back. So I wouldn't count them out to not win the Big East. I think if they hit their stride, they can come back and win the thing because I think they're 1-1 right now, right? In the Big East.
I believe
They're 2-1.
yes.
They
Yeah.
picked up a
Okay, so they're
big
2-1.
win
Well, they
on
beat the Paul.
Christmas.
They just beat the Paul.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I mean they had some easy games early on their schedule that built their confidence. They got their guys back. So I think Creighton's still in the loop. And obviously I think Xavier is one first year since I've been really a huge fan of Xavier that I think they actually have a shot to win the Big East. If they can beat UConn on New Year's Eve, then that would play huge dividends for them winning the Big East. But there's something about UConn, and I know they're insanely good. They beat every team by double digits, but there's something about that team that I feel like they're going to fall off eventually. I can't explain what it is. There's no evidence to prove that that's going to happen. But from what I've seen, from Dan Hurley in the Big East so far, I feel like their team always kind of does bad towards the end of the year, and they fall off. They don't do well in the tournament. So I'm kind of expecting that too. So I wouldn't say UConn win the Big East is such a surefire thing. I really think it's up in the air between, the teams I think that could win it as of now are Xavier, Creighton, UConn, obviously. Then, I have thrown Villanova because their name is Villanova. But, yeah, those 4 teams I think are the favorites. But it's going to be really a competitive push to see who gets the 2nd, 3rd, and 4th spot in the Big East.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. I think that UConn Xavier tilt that we're going to have on New Year's Eve is going to have major implication as to who gets the 1 seed. Because at the end of the day, the other thing that I always bring up with the Big East is yeah, you may win the regular season title, but what happened the 1 year Xavier won the regular season title? The conference is absolute madness. We saw Georgetown win the conference tournament a few years ago. So it's so hard to go into Madison Square Gardens and come out victorious in that tournament. It's just, I think it's one of the top 2 hardest tournaments to win in college basketball, just because of the nature of the conference year in and year out. I feel like there's so many more upsets and weird happenings in that tournament than some of the other conferences, but it just feels like UConn's kind of the tier 1 right now. And then tier 2 could really have up to 5 teams, whether it be Xavier, Providence, Villanova. I think Creighton's back in that conversation. But the teams that I really want to talk about are, obviously, we mentioned Providence earlier. I'm going to hand it back over to Carson because he had the great point that any game at the Dunkin' Donuts Center is just havoc. There's so many good games. They went to that double overtime thriller against Marquette the other night. And it just seems like whenever they're at home, not to mention Providence is a team that's got Bryce Hopkins, who's scoring virtually 25 a game, a UK transfer. Hopkins could be in the conversation if Adama Sanogo wasn't as good as he is for Big East Player of the Year when it's all said and done.
I loved what I saw out of Providence against Marquette. That game was back and forth, and there was multiple times where I think they definitely, obviously it could have went either way. I think it went in double overtime, but I loved what I saw out of Providence. I think they're a very talented team. They're a lot better than I kind of remembered them being. I think they're always competitive every year. I think Ed Cooley is one of the best coaches in college basketball. But like you said, Bryce Hopkins had 29 points and 23 rebounds in that game. They had a lot of players that played really well. They have not had an easy introduction to Big East play this year. I mean, they had to go on the road to Seton Hall. They beat them by 4, and then they beat Marquette at home. They go to Butler Thursday. So we'll see how they fare in that game. But 2-0 against two pretty tough teams. I think Marquette was really hot going into that game too. So to beat them was huge. And then Seton Hall, I mean, we've seen how they fared. They kind of had, maybe, I don't know if it's unlucky is the word, but they lose to Providence by 4, and then they lose to Xavier on. I mean, they could have definitely won that game. They had a great last shot from what I saw. Could have definitely went in. So like they could be looking at 2-0 in the Big East instead.
Yeah.
I believe they're 0-2. So like I think they're also like they've lost 2 games by a total of what, like 5 points. So like that's just brutal. And you're 0-2 right now. You could easily be 2-0. So I think the Big East, like once again, I think the Big East is talented top to bottom. It'll be a conference that beats up on each other like they have in the past years. So, but I think Providence is a really good 10-3 team right now that I'm curious to see how they'll fare against teams like Xavier and Creighton and obviously UConn.
My
Yeah,
question
and-
about the Big East is kind of like, is there a team in the Big East that can get a 1 seed or a 2 seed? Because we haven't had one of those in a long time. Right now it's looking like UConn, and I hope UConn can do that. But the problem with the Big East recently has just been they beat up on each other way too much. So
Mhm.
I would love to see a 1 seed or a 2 seed out of this conference. I'm hoping it can be UConn.
Yeah, I would
Well,
say
I
I think
mean,
UConn or nothing. I mean, at this point in the year, I mean,
Yeah.
I understand like a team like Creighton or Xavier could win the Big East, but like I know there's not like a ton of weight on the beginning of the year, but it's just kind of like the 1 seed. Usually like around 5 losses or
Mhm.
less, and so like like if Xavier, if a non-UConn team wins the Big East, I mean they're obviously going to have around 5 losses, maybe a couple more. But I think
I
there's
think
so many other dominant teams in college basketball this year that's gonna be hard to make a case that if it's not UConn,
that's like my number one pet peeve at the Big East. They beat up on each other way too much. And
there's no
obviously, I
fix
mean,
for that. I
with
mean,
the success of the Big East in the tournament, it kind of proves that maybe they don't deserve the seeds because besides Villanova, the Big East teams don't do well in the tournament. But yeah, I mean, there hasn't been a top seed team in the Big East in forever, and I don't see there being one this year either.
I'm just really curious to see how Dan Hurley coaches with a team this good. Like this is obviously easily his best UConn team. I mean,
yeah.
2018, 2019, his first year with UConn, they went 16 and 17. Next year, 19 and 12. Next year, 15 and 8 during COVID. Next year, 23 and 10, or last season, 23 and 10. Then this year, they're 13 and 0 so far. I'm really curious to see how he'll coach as like the top dog, kind of like. I feel like he's always kind of been like an underdog kind of coach.
Oh yes.
Know
that's how he was at
Yeah.
Rhode Island.
Yeah, so that's like my like. I'm curious to see how if it affects him in terms of like he's the kind of like they're like kind of the team right now other than Purdue.
It's,
Like
I think a good way to put it is like it's theirs to lose. His has always been like
Right.
he has nothing to lose, so he has everything to gain. This year, it's like everyone expects a ton of him, so they only can go backwards from now.
right. So I'm curious to see. Like I feel like some teams are just way better when they're an underdog. Like I feel like so I'm really curious to see how he'll be as a coach. As kind of like I said, that like one of the top few teams in college basketball. And I'm also curious if a team like this kind of like needs a loss to kind of like
Yeah.
like obviously you want to win every game, but like I feel like at some point, I mean, I know in the OT interview, like one of the biggest things that stuck out to me is like he really wished that Kentucky team had a loss before they played Wisconsin in the Final Four. Because like I feel like you just need to know what that feels like and know like I think you can arguably learn more from a close loss than a close win, just because I think you can like pick up on what you did wrong and how to get better. So I think when you're 13 and 0, it's like, what are you stressing right now? Like obviously you have things to work on, but like I feel like maybe a loss for this team could benefit them. Obviously you want to win every Big East game, but
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up because you say like you need a you learn more from a close loss than a close win, but they haven't had either because they've
Right.
won every game but double digits.
yeah.
So what's gonna happen when UConn is up 2 or down 2 with a
Right.
minute left to go? They don't
Yeah.
know what to do. They haven't been in that position yet. So yeah, it's interesting to see what will happen in a situation like that.
I honestly think with UConn, they're a team that if they lose at the Cintas Center on Saturday, I think that will make them better.
I agree. I was almost gonna go there. Like, I think I don't know about better, but I think that like in the long run, I think it just might motivate them even more.
Yeah.
I've never been in a locker room when you're 13-0, but I can't imagine there's much worry or like stress on, like I said, when you're 13-0 riding high, you're beating everyone by 10, 15 points. Like, it's hard to imagine, for me at least, like how much you really how many things you're tweaking and how, like, you know what I mean? So I don't know. I'm really curious to see how they'll perform Saturday against Xavier. If they get punched in the mouth, how they'll respond, because I think they haven't yet. I mean, they've coasted by literally everyone. You could argue Georgetown kind of threw them a punch. Like I said, that game kind of went back and forth, but ultimately I think that game script was kind of like, yeah, Georgetown kind of had their run, but I think UConn kind of just warmed down. I mean, I think games like that can be close for a while, but as the game wears on, I think UConn was, I never thought UConn was going to lose that game. But once again, I think Saturday could tell us a lot about how good UConn really is.
Yeah, the one thing I do want to talk about too with Xavier is it feels like there's so many sleepers that can give anyone a game. You look at Butler, Marquette, Seton Hall, and possibly Georgetown too, as just those teams that can hang around. The other thing I want to talk about is obviously we've asserted that we think Big East is right around a top 4, top 5 conference. They might be the top conference in terms of coaches. If we look down the list, got Bobby Hurley, Ed Cooley, Sean Miller, Kyle Neptune is new, but then you've got McDermott with Creighton, Marquette's got Shaka Smart, Butler's got Thad Matta, Seton Hall's got Shaheen Holloway, who obviously we've seen what he can do with a program. It's just a matter of time before he gets his guys. It just feels like this conference, top to bottom, has some really freaking good coaches in it. And even though, and you talk about Kyle Neptune, we're 1 year removed from Jay Wright, and this conference, just so many good coaches have come through here. It just feels like this is, if you're an up and coming coach, this is the conference you want to be in.
I feel like best conference for coaches still to me is the SEC, but I think the Big East is definitely loaded with coaches. But yeah, I agree. I think there's a lot of really good that's why it's so hard to win. That's why everyone beats up on one another. Like, there's not like a coach you can kind of like rely on to mess up. Whereas I don't want to ruffle feathers here, but Travis Steele, I feel like if you're Jay Wright and you're going into a game against Travis Steele,
you're not worried at all. You're not ruffling any feathers.
Yeah.
You're
banking on Travis
that's
Steele to
an
make
easy win.
Yeah, you're banking on Travis Steele to make like a stupid mistake or two to swing the momentum or whatever and give you an upper hand. So like,
Carson, I'll elaborate on that. Here's what you know is going to happen if you're Jay Wright. Travis Steele is back in his day. He's going to leave Zach Freemantle in the floor during one of his temper tantrums when he's in his sophomore and junior year. He's going to take Kiki Tandy out too early. He's going to pick up a technical at about 10:34 left on the clock in the second half. And then when the team gets to the end, he's not going to call his timeouts right. And you're going to skate away with an easy win. That's exactly what you're thinking if you're a Big East coach, especially an experienced one like Jay Wright. You're licking your chops if you're playing Travis Steele and Xavier.
I didn't want to go there, but I mean, I'm glad you said it on me. I mean, I didn't go that far because it's not like I thoroughly follow Xavier, but yeah, I mean, I'm glad you said it, not me.
What company is he a reporter for now, or an analyst for?
What
sports cast is he a analyst for now?
Who?
Jay Wright?
Yeah.
CBS.
Is there that game will be on Fox, won't it?
Yeah, Fox has got the rights.
I don't
know why
that would be so funny if he called that game and would just if he was able to call that game and just be like, "Oh, been here before."
Yeah.
He'd be My favorite thing about the Big East coaches is that there's a mix of like veteran guys and then rising guys. Like Shaheen always rising. You could say Neptune, he's rising. Tony Stubberfield, I mean, kind of an older guy, but he was a Villanova assistant, and I liked a lot. I still believe that he's going to do good things at DePaul. You could say Shaka is a rising guy. I don't know if that really counts because he was at Texas and just kind of like.
Yeah, I feel like he's proved too much and been.
He's kind of in the middle of his career, I feel like.
Yeah, but then you got guys like Sean Miller, Thad Mata, who's been the two guys that had a ton of experience, well-known guys. Greg McDermott, Ed Cooley. It's like it's a perfect mix of everyone. I don't know. My favorite thing about the Big East is everyone knows the coaches. I think every coach has a personality to them. It kind of reminds me of like, and I'm no way, shape, or form comparing us to the '80s Big East, but I kind of like how it somewhat resembles that. How the coaches are, how like there's all these big time coaches in the conference, knowing all their personalities. I think it's kind of cool with the same conference name and having that again.
Yeah, absolutely. The one thing I do want to talk about, kind of at the bottom every year of the Big East, I feel like is Georgetown. How much longer can we give Patrick Ewing? Obviously, he's Georgetown legacy, went there, was one of their best players ever. It feels like they have struggled mightily year after year, but it always feels like Georgetown is not a game that you can just write off because they give so many teams such a good game. How much more rope are you going to give Patrick Ewing if you're in the Georgetown athletic department?
If I was in Georgetown's athletic department, Patrick Ewing's rope would have ended like a year or two ago. I have no idea why he's still there.
Yeah.
He is getting some of the best recruits in the country, and they will transfer after 1 year after being there.
I was gonna say, I think them winning the Big East Conference tournament might have bought him a few too many years. I was like the Oregon State coach. I forget his name, but they're a god awful basketball program, and they made a run in March, and he's gonna stay there now for a while. But Ewing, here's the thing: when you hire a legacy coach, he's obviously gonna get some rope because it's like the fan base automatically loves them. Like you're gonna have blind faith, kind of, even if they aren't a good coach. So because you want to see him do well, and you don't want to tarnish that legacy really. So you want to give him as much time as he needs to prove himself. But I mean, the DMV produces some of the best high school talent in the country. I think if you got a young up and comer in there, they could easily be a top 3 or 4 team in the Big East just with how much talent comes out of that area.
Yeah.
I don't want to compare them to Penny just because they're both former players, but I think it's 2 teams that get a ton of talent and then they don't know how to use it.
Yeah.
So I'm not gonna compare them just because that's just an easy cop out compared to 2 former players that are now coaches. But I think they're kind of similar in the sense that both can get any talent they want. I mean, if you have Patrick Ewing recruiting you, it's automatically intriguing. Same with Penny Hardaway. So it's I don't know. I think if they got a young up and comer coaching there, I think they could dominate, honestly.
I want Georgetown to get the opposite of young. I want them to get a veteran guy.
Established guy?
Huh?
An established guy? More
I think Georgetown needs an established guy because their program is so it's so far gone at this point from what it used to be.
Yeah.
They're nowhere near close to what they used to be. I look at Georgetown the same way as DePaul now because I haven't seen Georgetown be good since that FGCU loss when they were the 2 seed.
Otto Porter.
That was 10 years. Yeah, I was 10 years.
Who was their coach during that run?
John Thompson's son.
Okay.
Yeah, so that's the thing with Georgetown. They love their legacy. They had John Thompson, and I don't know if they had someone between that, but they've had John Thompson Jr. the third, and then they've had Patrick Ewing. It's they need to get they're just so mesmerized with the 80s and the days that John Thompson was the guy in college basketball. They just need to move past that. It's over. They needed a new established guy that can calm down everyone in DC and just rebuild this program because it's dead. The program's dead. They get insanely good recruits, but they're not even close to making NIT anymore.
Yeah.
They're so far gone from they used to be. It's just really embarrassing. And there's no fans going to their games. It's almost like they don't have a basketball program anymore.
Yeah, they are far past the experimental period of trying to hire coaches that have not proven themselves at other schools. You're absolutely right. They're very far gone from that, and they can't really take any more chances going forward. I think we've encapsulated the conference really well. We'll do last thoughts here, but the one thing I do want to ask you guys, Cole, you got something?
Yeah, well, another leash question. I mean, I know it's his first year, but how long of a leash is Shaheen Holloway going to get with Seton Hall? I mean, obviously, by Seton Hall standards, they haven't had the greatest start of the year, but obviously, a guy coming from a once in a lifetime run with St. Peter's. I know he's a Seton Hall guy, but like obviously Seton Hall over the past, let's call it decade, that they've had a lot of success with guys like Miles Powell. How many years does he get before like their mediocre Seton Hall team? How many years does he get before it's like, all right, like you're
I think
I
Sheen
look at-
Holloway has a long leash
I
because
think I've been pretty impressed by them so far.
I was also gonna say I like the way.
Yeah, I know. I wasn't saying he like was doing a bad job. I'm saying, first year Big East coach, like you said, Big East coaches. I mean, there's a lot of those coaches, have been established for, however many years. And he's like one of the few like first year guys.
Yeah.
Coming
I
from
look at this is my biggest takeaway is I look at Shaheen Holloway and Wes Miller, as weird as this may sound, in a very similar light, as I respect the hell out of both of them in terms of how they coach, but both those guys need to have their guys in the program for them to succeed, I feel like. And Wes Miller is getting there, but I think we can all agree that Wes Miller cannot perform at his best as a coach until he gets his guys top to bottom on his roster. I look at Shaheen Holloway as just a similar situation where Shaheen Holloway coaches a very specific brand of basketball. He's very defensive oriented, gritty guys, kind of wants these kids that maybe slip through the cracks at other places. And I feel like he's got to have the time necessary to get those guys in his program before he can be properly evaluated.
I think the only difference between the two would be this is Wes Miller's 12th year coaching.
Yeah.
Shaheen Holloway's still like very young in his coaching career, so he has a lot to figure out. But yeah, I agree with the take that both of them, they need their guys. I mean, it's not like Seton Hall is playing with like top end talent right now. So I think every new coach kind of needs 3 or 4 years to establish themselves. I know it's like we live in a like world now where like everybody wants everything right away to be perfect. It's just not going to be that when you're trying to not rebuild. He's not rebuilding Seton Hall, but like when you're trying to build your own culture and your own like
rebrand. I mean, that's just like a new coach.
Whenever people one thing now is look at Baylor, Bryce Drew. Like it took him like 12 years to get to when he first got there, they had like a murder charge on one of their players. Really one of the worst programs in Power 5. And then 12 years later, so they won the national championship. Like it takes time. Yeah. And I agree with you. I think every head coach should get at least 4 years, but somewhere between 4 and 6 years, 4 and 5 years, 4 and 6 years. Sorry.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. Last kind of wrap things up. I think we've had a pretty good deep dive in the conference. Just give me a winner. Who you think's going to take this conference home? I don't care if it's a cop out saying UConn. I don't think that's a cop out because this conference is so hard. But start with you, Carson. Who you got?
I think I just have to go with UConn right now. I think Dan Hurley's a great coach. I don't know. I wish I had seen like more. I wish I could like make this pick after the UConn Xavier game, but right now I'm gonna go UConn. Like I know it's a safe pick, but like for me, I don't know. I think the way they're playing right now, if they can keep playing this way in conference play at UConn, like playing in UConn's a very difficult place to win. I think ultimately they'll just keep scratching out wins. Right now I have to go with UConn.
Cole, what do you got?
Same thing, UConn. I mean, like if you ask us this question, a month from now, it could be a completely different question. But I mean, UConn's given us no reason to not fake them winning. So like, because you're asking the question now, there's no reason. Like, you guys might have differing opinions, but like, there's no reason I have. I would have another team that would win the Big East. But yeah, like Carson said, this Saturday's gonna have a big implication on that. But yeah, like I mean, if Sonogo keeps playing like that, like he has been, he could very well win Big East Player of the Year. But like that is the one thing. Like I know it's going a little off topic here for a second, but like that's an even better question is like who's going to win Big East Player of the Year? Because if it's not a UConn guy, that's just going to be.
I think it could be Sully Boom.
It could be Boom. I think Hopkins is in the running. I think.
Do you think it comes from
the Brenner could be one too?
Do you think it comes from a team that finishes first or second?
I don't because the teams beat up so much on each other. I feel like this is the conference where your team's finish matters a lot less than maybe some of the other conferences.
Yeah, so
I feel like awards like that naturally go to teams that win a lot.
That's what I'm saying. I
Yeah.
think though, because it's always the Villanova guy that wins it.
That is
So
true. That
I
is
think
true.
it's going to be either Boom. Well, I mean, we'll get to my predictions soon, but I think it's going to be Boom, Hopkins, or Sunogo.
Well, yeah, that's the question. Like I mean, same thing with the NFL MVP going on right now. Like, is it a success award or a stats award?
That is
It's
true.
both.
Very true.
Yeah, it's more success though.
They need to fix that just in all of sports. What does like
Yeah.
MVP or
Right. I mean, if
player of the year
MVP was given for what it stands for, LeBron would literally be like a
Yeah, he
15,
win every
16
year.
time MVP.
Yeah.
I think
that is
they
true.
maybe they need to rename
if
it,
it's
but
true value to your team, yeah, like LeBron, like that, like why even
Seems
have
like Tom Brady.
LeBron every year?
Yeah. I don't know. Yeah. The MVP is always just like a controversial thing because it's like
It's
who
so
really.
subjective based on the
Right,
like,
yeah.
it's the
Yeah.
it's the committee that gets to choose it, I guess. So
For sure.
DJ Reader for MVP. Matt, what do you got?
so I got three teams, and I kind of alluded to earlier. I got obviously UConn, and then I got to go with Xavier because I like what they've done so far, and I think the Big East is a little weaker this year than usual. It's strong from top to bottom, but there's no top dog besides UConn. And then I got Providence. Providence has Hopkins, and then Ed Cooley in the Big East is like he always does well in the Big East.
Yeah.
He always scares me. Like I hate playing Providence. There's no besides Villanova, the second team that I hate playing the most is always Providence. I
Yeah.
don't think whenever they play Providence, Dunkin' Donuts Center, I never think Xavier's gonna win. And I think a lot of teams think like that. They protect their home court very well.
Yeah.
They're like
And-
20-1 in their last like 21 home games or something like that. Just
Yeah.
a ridiculous stat.
So I don't think people are talking enough about Providence. I think again, I think it's another year for the Big East where their highest seed is gonna be like a 3 seed or a 4 seed because I don't think UConn is gonna keep this up. Again, there's no evidence to support that, but I just don't see UConn, just only losing 3 or 4 games this year. But if I'm gonna go with a winner, I hate to go with everyone else and say UConn, so I'm gonna go with Providence.
Yeah. All right. Yeah.
But obviously, I gotta say this: I think there's not gonna be an outright winner of the Big East. I think it's gonna be a tie between a couple teams.
Interesting.
Yeah.
I think that this is I'm gonna do somewhat of a cop-out take. I'm gonna take I think it's gonna be either a regular season win for Xavier or UConn, but I think Providence is gonna win the tournament. I think Ed Cooley, when he gets to Madison Square Garden, is just on another level. They have so much success there over the years. I feel like they're a perennial Final Four team for the Big East tournament each year. And I think they're going to lock up another tournament title. But yeah, I think that's kind of all there is to see about Big East. Only time will tell with this conference. There's a lot yet to be decided, but good talk on the Big East, guys. Anyone got anything before we send it home?
That's it.
All right. Well, thanks for listening to Finding Nylon episode 5. Be on the lookout for episode 6. Might have another special guest coming on. We had a lot of fun talking with Owen Timmerding on last week's episode. So we're going to try to keep this momentum rolling. Thanks for all of our listeners on both YouTube and Spotify. And yeah, like Cole said, Houday, Bengals trying to make a push for the 1 seed. Thanks for listening, guys. See you next time.